talking about complex programming. And to recap what Maria Colleen talked about last week, she brought up powerful points in last week's conversation about depression, and she also shared her personal story. She also made mention to the term complex programming, which is what we'll be talking about today. Her background is within yoga, shamanism, health, and mystical art, and she provides this gift to practicing many different healing modalities that will journey back to the wholeness from the original spirit. So really, we talked about the pebble effect last week, so go back and watch that, and how this stone thrown into our innate consciousness emanates and expands throughout our journey. So if we're brave enough to follow it, is what she continues to say, we still retain the memory of who we were originally, but we're always constantly evolving. So in this episode, we'll be focusing specifically on complex programming. Next week, it will lead us into the paradigms that we allow ourselves to confine ourselves within. And we also talk a little bit about the subconscious. Colleen talks about 3 different aspects of the mind intellect. So she'll go over those in next week's conversation, but just kind of to give you a heads up, we might touch on it this week. And also talking about some polarities. Certain things we don't have a choice on, which Maria Colleen explains that this is our dharma. This is the choice that we were not given. We were born with this prakriti, and this is what makes us up. And so we're learning how to manage that, because at times it can be overwhelming when we come into that space. So dharma is mainly explored as, or expressed as, what we were created to do. And sometimes it's overwhelming for some of us when we start to enter into and embody what our passions are, and pouring ourselves into those passions, and then recognizing, now what am I going to do with this? How do I even share this? I don't want to utilize the word, how do I prove myself? Because you have nothing to prove, but everything to share. And so the origins come back to mental health. It's our mindset. And we also talk about things that have maybe created blockages in our lives, and maybe it's a naysayer that's constantly beating you down or discouraging you, and they're always around you. And so over time, that can take a toll on you. A lot of the times it's our parents, a lot of the times it's our mom, a lot of the times it's our partner. So really thinking about these mindsets and these intellects, and knowing that it's not just you too. We have an environment that also contributes to the way that we are manifesting the unmanifest. When we deny, as Maria Colleen says, when we deny who we are, and that includes foregoing our personal power and ignoring our needs, we are not only mentally ill, but also become physically and spiritually ill. Mental illness is like ancient programming that has bugs and has become outdated. And I really love how she expresses that, because she also has a really great technology analogy for modern times in expressing this exact quote. So without further ado, I am going to be inviting our friend Maria Colleen to join us, and let's give her. All right. Welcome, sister. We must have been on the same wavelength, because it's like braid on the side day, right?
I was actually just thinking that I was braiding while I was reading my notes, and okay, I'm going to be prepared. I even put makeup on, I shower, and then I look up and you have a braid too.
I do. I'm so excited. We're so like-minded. Sister, please share your light with us and talk to us about, really, first start with this quote. Explain it in the technical analogy that you shared not so long ago about debugging these programs.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so it kind of goes back to this belief. I mean, you can prove it like scientifically and also spiritually, right? Because at least that's what we're finding out. And I'm still new to understanding all of these things, and I love it. I get so nerdy about learning about where trauma comes from, because we blame, and trauma, and when I mean trauma, I mean disconnection, right? And I think Gabor Mate talks about how addiction is just this like desire for connection, and we have soft addictions and we have hard addictions. And I think that the programming, I think we're addicted to the programming sometimes, because I see this in myself, even in like the ways that I think, right? And I'm like, I'm addicted to that in a way, and I'm only aware of that now because I see it as a persistent thing. So, you know, and then I wrote yesterday in my journal when we were I was considering talking about this, about how like the programming, we don't even know how old it is. You know what I mean? Like when like you use the analogy of following like a pebble into the water, and it's like, we don't know how old the pebble is, how deep the chasm is. Like, literally, we don't know. And we won't know unless we actually investigate, right? It's like, where is that coming from? It's not just, like, that's how humans are programmed, like, initially, right? From God. Like, if we truly believe that we are divine spirits and that we, you know, we come from a wholeness, then we have to believe that whatever is keeping us from that wholeness is it's not necessarily an organic piece of us. The way that we respond are like our ways of managing. And I relate that in like sensitivities. I relate that in unprocessed loss, unprocessed traumas. Like, we have to keep going. And so find these ways to sort of contort ourselves. And then we think we've been like this for so long that it's natural. You know, like if you adjust somebody's body, right, and you're like, oh my God, and like they're like, I've never felt like this before. And I'll give you an example. When I was in second grade, I had to get glasses, and I had been living up until 8 years old with like bad eyes, you know, and I'm like, they gave me the glasses, and I'm like, this is what the world is supposed to look like.
Wow, right? Change of perspective.
Yeah, and so I want to share the one thing that I wrote down when it comes to programming when I was thinking about this is like change, resistance, and transformation, right? And like, how bad does it have to get? Just curious, like, how bad does it have to get before you realize that the program that you're playing, you know, and this is not to shame anyone with mental health issues, not at all. I mean, like, if people told me, like, you know, and I'm going to get to that in a second, but what I wanted to say is like letting go of the old story is like 1,000 deaths, right? We don't like to die. We're afraid of death. And we're afraid to let go of our identity because we don't know who we will become. And some of those patterns are so deeply rooted. And I was told this so many times by so many people, and I wasn't honestly doing it myself because it's really hard. It's really hard to be like, that programming is something that I lived by and had my identity wrapped around, right, in a way. And who am I going to be without that? And also, what does that mean that I have to shift? You know, and what work does that look like? What do I have to face about myself? But the thing that I love is that when you're honest, the humor comes after.
You know, you bring up some really good points, Maria, because we're talking about the kleshas. We're talking about the aversions that we have, and this is the human portion of yoga. So in the 8 limbs of yoga, we have the niyamas and the yamas, which are the governors. You know, the yamas are the administrator, and the niyamas are our spiritual divine walk. They go hand in hand with each other. And ultimately, we also come to face what are known as the koshas. And the koshas are the different layers of our existence. Through that existence, we take on these different levels, such as anamaya. It's the first one. It's the first one. It's our environment. It's everything that contributes to us. It's birth. It's here we are now on this planet. What do we do? And through the growth and through these patterns of learning and having learned or have had learned from the past, we enter into those spaces instinctually, intuitively almost. And then we come into a space of knowing. This happens to be around the age of 3, 2, or no, I don't like that. No, yes, terrible twos. We hear this tantrum, right? By the time we're 6, we're pretty much set in our way. We're pretty much set in our way. No matter what has happened, feelings of rejection from family, not feeling loved enough, whatever that is, by the time we're 6 years old, scientifically proven, I can share that with you on my website. There we have, by the time we're 6 years old, we have already been conditioned to understand whatever those traumas are. And therefore we attract those behaviors and or those people, places, or things because we're now used to it and we become embodying it. The stone, the emanating portion of the stone on the surface is now touching all the things that would contribute to that manifestation. When we become a little bit older in our grade level, we start to now form aversions, devesha, fears. We begin to get into the I center of ourself, the I-ness. The kleshas are basically like the bad guys and the koshas are like the good guys. And we are working together with them to face each of these. And when you brought up something super point on, and that was afraid of death, apinavisha, that's afraid of death. It is completely being afraid of death. It's completely being afraid of the unknown. It's having aversion, devesha, from actually embodying it because you're afraid of it and you're making up excuses. And this comes back from programming. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Excuses, we're so good at them.
So good at doing it.
And then you catch yourself, oh, I'm doing it again.
I mean, our friend Superfly Ashley, who's on Instagram, posted something so hilarious. And she did a reel of herself, and she had on a funny little face mask on, a little champagne glass in her hand, a robe. And she's like, you know what? I'm a flake. I'm going to tell you I'm going to do something. Sure, it sounds good, but it's just the icing on the cake. I'm not going to go. I don't really want to leave. I'm not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, I just don't feel like it. And she went on basically in a really comedic way explaining that abhinavisha, that fear, that also that like aversion. And it really was so realistic. It was very authentic because I saw myself in that. I'm really cozy right here. I really don't want to experience that. But I'm also programming myself to constantly do that because of COVID. I've become so much lazier. And I've noticed I don't want to go to the studio anymore. I'd rather just do it online. I can do it when I feel like it. I could pick my favorite teacher. You know, I totally am seeing my own programming as well as my mental health is different because now I'm afraid to be in a studio environment because I don't know how it's going to impact my health. We're sharing the same breath. We're sharing the same air. We're sharing the same environment. So even though it's pleasant, do I feel comfortable in that environment when I'm so cozy right where I'm at and I don't need to go anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. So how does this affect us as well? How can you shine some light on that? Because I know you've actually taken this on before COVID. You've been in this space. So share with us that.
There's so much to say around that. And what I will use the example of the last couple of days, I'm coming back to life. And what I say, people laugh at me and they're like, oh, but you're starting from the beginning. I'm like, I was like, what are you talking about? I'm on level ground right now. I was in like the seventh layer of hell for a while.
Yes, girl.
So lately I've been like, okay, I have to have practices because when I show up for my practice, I build confidence in myself and I know this now, so I don't have an excuse. Like I don't have an excuse. Like once you have an awareness, it's like, okay, you're giving yourself the excuse at that point. And you have to say, I know that I'm giving myself the excuse and I accept or I don't accept which one,
Yes.
So I didn't want to get up and do yoga. Even though I used to love doing yoga, and for a while, even before COVID, I had so much trapped anger and emotion stuck in my body, right? And it was like, literally like my auric field, my interoceptive sensibilities were like buzzing all the time. And I could tell, and I did some reading about like the nervous system and I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And I had gut problems and whatever. And I didn't want to do yoga because I didn't want to feel it. I didn't want to have to pay attention to, I didn't think that I had the capacity. I didn't think that I could handle it. And in some situations, I don't think I could because I was literally protecting myself because I was in environments that probably were not conducive to processing trauma, you know, and I want to, and that's a lot of trauma. We have all sorts of traumas, right? And I want to just interject something about spiritual growth, because it's something that I learned recently is like, you can go into the spiritual growth aspect of your process and your deprogramming, we could call it, but you have to do the like expression trauma feeling first, because then all of this stuff is going to like almost sometimes re-traumatize you. Right? So you have to like go back to the basics in a way of like, okay, I'm just here, and I know that I'm the only one that can do something about changing my situation. Am I happy with my situation? Yes or no? How much can, like I wrote, how bad does it have to get? You know, and I was like, I swear to you, I was bedridden for months out of the last 3 years, like, because my mind was so strong, and it wasn't even just me. Like, you know, in Islam, they call it the jinn. It's like the evil spirits, you know? And I just felt like, how are you expecting me to face this? Like, how are you expecting me to get up and do all the things that I used to love to do now? And because I've cleared a lot of that and I've expressed a lot of that, I can have more space now in my nervous system. You know, like my nervous system is, I know I'm like excited right now, but it's because I spend a lot of time quiet and by myself. So I'm like, you're like, you need friends. And I'm like, I have a lot of them and they're in my head. You know, I want to make sure that the person that I'm presenting to the world is amicable, you know, and then I'll come out of the shell.
It's okay to have all of those friends, because they are who make you up. It's all of our different layers of ourselves.
It's true. One of them is a Ukrainian girl. I bring her out sometimes. I'm like, you need to do this, bitch. Come on, like, let's go.
Give you the kick in the butt you need. You know, I love what you said here. So one time we had a conversation, and it was just us chit-chatting. We were just, you know, I called you one morning, and you were still kind of asleep, and you said, I'm waking up into my body. I'm waking up into my body. And I'll tell you something, that became my mantra. I'm waking up into my body. And then you mentioned something again, and you said, I'm coming back to life. And that is kind of part of that breaking down those complex programs, those paradigms that once was, is now translating into something so much more pure. Salsha, purification, part of the niyamas, right? It's the process of the spiritual growth. Like you said, you know, I'm showing up for my practice, and I'm showing up for myself. I'm showing up for myself. And when you show up for yourself and you show up for your practice, you're embodying the confidence that you already always had. Mm-hmm. But that we've put the blinders on and kind of shunned our way around it, and we looked outside of ourselves to figure out what was going to really take on what we've already had inside. The confidence, we were looking outside of ourselves. The mirror is not your confidence. Your confidence, work without a mirror, and now check where your confidence comes from. Yeah, it's not a selfie. It's you doing the work, doing the grit, and seeing how you're evolving over it. Bedridden for 3 years, and look at you now talking on Instagram, sharing your story. Where at one time I would be like, she may or may not, she's probably gonna flake out, right? Right, we just talked about, I'm gonna say yes, but I'm really cozy and it's too early, and you know. So we flake out to ourselves all the time. It's the story we tell ourselves. And last week you hit a point, and you said, it punctured my auric field. It punctured my auric field. And then today, you know, you didn't want to feel it. And we know, as Baron Baptiste says, you know, we got to feel to heal. And in order to reach the space of Ishvara Paranidhana, Brahman, Atman, we go through this, through God consciousness, we go through the work of the yamas, the self-work. Just like you talked about, that the inner dialogue, surviving the story within, overcoming that. Not to make it somber note, but during this transitionary time, you notice something different, because last week you even said, I put myself in a mental institution because that's where I was. You met yourself where you were, you took recognition of it, then you put yourself outside yourself, into a different environment with the mindset thinking that outside yourself, this was going to help you within. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what that experience was like and what you witnessed from yourself and what you witnessed from how they were adding to your environment?
You mean in the institution?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
I'm taking notes because it's just phenomenal. I love you.
Oh, I love you too. I do. I love you so much. And I'm grateful for you asking because, there's certain things that I think, well, let me go back and say, I talked to a girl while I was there and she had been put in there because she tried to kill herself. And then she seemed really nice when I was talking to her. She was sharing her food with me and everything. And it just made me, and I asked her how she did it. Because, it's like in the mental institution, You don't have any, tell me your shit. Like, what the hell? We're all here. You know what I mean? So she told me she, took a whole bottle and she's like, don't ever do that. She's like, I was still alive, but I couldn't, hold my body. And so for me, I always knew that I wasn't going to kill myself. I always knew that I wasn't. But the ways in which that I felt and the ways in which that my energy had been it felt like my energy had been stolen out of me. And then whatever I had left, I just kept giving away. Right. And then the mind was just, and this was when we talk about puncturing the auric field, it felt like something else had entered and was chatting in my ear. I mean, literally, but it was my own thoughts. And I was aware enough to know that these thoughts were not mine, but at the same time, I didn't have enough help and structure, and I'd been trying to do it for years, to address where in the fuck this was coming from. Excuse my language, but really, where was this coming from? And I knew that my mother's brother had killed himself, right? And so it was just, and I remember I was sitting in the mental institution. I was like, okay, you're here. You literally have the only power that you have right now is over how you think and how you experience the situation. Because of COVID and because of all these things, we couldn't go outside. So I didn't go outside for a week. And luckily I was in a room with these really big windows, right? And we had this rec room that the TV was on all the time. And then we had the hallway, and that was it. And the food, and then there was a little room where we could draw and color, and then they had groups. And I remember, for the first few days, I was so insanely resistant. I was like, I can't believe that my parents put me in this place, and I knew that I had been pushing them to that. I had been pushing them to that because I'll admit it, I was threatening suicide. It's not funny. It's not funny at all, but it's because I felt so stuck and so insanely powerless that I was I don't know what the fuck else to do right now. And everyone's like, you need medication, you need medication. And I'm like, yeah, bitches, I need a lot more than medication right now. I need a
That's the way to keep it real.
Take me outside.
But you know what you did do? You started expressing yourself through art. And that became so powerful. And we talk about this. We talk about how art is an authentic representation of your truth and the colors that you use, the moods that you're in, the experiences that you're feeling. And it was almost as though even you felt almost like you didn't have a voice because you're in this space that took that energy from you, but you were able to still not be muted through the vibrance of your light, because even in the darkest of places, it's like a circle, and a circle of light, and the energy ultimately comes back to where the source is. So even in the darkest of times, we still find the light. And in Ayurveda, this is known as our ojas. This is known as our innate vibrant, the last physical substance of our food processing, the nourishing, that vibrant light that we feel, that high, and that's that glow that we see in our friends and our family. Pregnant ladies always have this glow about them, the ojas, right? Soma, the manifest version of it. And you were able to express that through your artwork. And share with us, through what you learned in that space internally, like how you were observing the known knower and the process of knowing, how did you begin to start expressing yourself with this awareness?
That's a great question. And that goes back, I mean, I was, we sang in soul school. So that was, we know the power of singing. So I will say that there was one day where I was like, I want to smoke. I couldn't do anything, right? I couldn't do anything. And so I just sat there and I was like, there's nothing I can do. So I just have to be with this right now. And from that space, I just wanted to start singing, and I did. And I was like in my room singing, and my roommate was like, "Oh, that's really nice. You like helped me go to sleep, And I realized that I didn't have to hide my light in that space. I had to protect myself from things that were, not going to be very helpful to me. But I ended up teaching yoga to this one girl, and she came to me and she was like, why did God abandon me? And she was from Turkey, and she just didn't understand English very well sometimes. And I was like, oh, honey. And I just like spoke to her for 30 minutes, and we sang a little bit. And then we sat and did art, in like the art room. And I think that I've always believed that art is this expression. We could call it that. We could call it, expression, because there's lots of different ways of artistry. Is this sort of, it's like the crack in the heart that allows God to come through, and lets the light shine again, because it doesn't have to be anything. It's like, it's sad, it's happy, it makes you feel, it comes from a true place. And in that moment, I was singing gospel songs because I was like, what must have the slaves felt, right? Like, what must have it been like to really live in slavery, right? To really truly not have any power and know that that's your, and where did they find that? And I'm not saying some people struggle to really harness that, and others it comes, it's not that it's the capacity is different. It's that how far away have we forgotten who we are, right? Like how far away. And art is that beautiful gift that allows us to remember what it's like to dream of something different, right? To dream, to be like, this is where we are, and we can dream of something different. And I say that because that's the reprogramming. We have to believe in stuff that we don't even know yet, or we don't even see yet. And that's why I want to tell everybody who has mental health issues, like there's gifts in there, and you also deserve to, know what your needs are, have the needs met, and to have support in doing it so that you can become more knowledgeable and then reconnect with the self, And for me, like my truest self, dancing, singing, making art, telling stories, and then annoying people with all the things that I read and discover.
But you're so right, because even Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this on his talks, and he's like, a very validated, doctor, and he speaks about the same neurons that fire together, wire together. And if we're not reprogramming ourselves, and we're constantly programming ourselves with the same type of routine, the same type of thought, those wires, those neurons are going to become stronger and stronger and stronger. And if we start to change that course, we start to really focus on, okay, well, that really sucks right now, but this is better. And you know what? Actually, this is better. And who would have thought this would have been better? I would have never known if I never did it. And then you start to keep doing new things, and new things begin to rewire, and new things begin to take shape, and new things begin to take form. And it becomes a different expression or attraction for you. And then all of a sudden the brain, and this is scientifically proven, I have studies on it as well. I have studies on everything. The whole teacher training I offer is scientifically based, evidence-based. And it's because of that. It's because there are medical professionals out there, you, me, and everyone watching this today and listening to this podcast later are going to know that we have resources for you from the yoga and Ayurveda world that are scientifically proven to support everything that was once thought as woo-woo, because we are the embodiment of the cosmic consciousness, and we are being able to prove it scientifically through our brain waves, through our neurons, our protons, atoms. We were able to prove all of this work that we're doing as practitioners of yoga and Ayurveda, because we're able to see the results in tangible form. The abstract becomes so tangible. The unmanifest becomes manifest. And believing in the stuff we don't see yet. We don't see those little protons and neurons. You don't see air, but you feel it. You know, there are things we don't see, the light waves that are connecting you and I right now, but I see you, right? So we have to really believe the intuition. We have to believe that consciousness exists outside and within ourselves. Consciousness is all there is. And so when we are a part of what you're talking about, this begins the biggest transformation, because now we're believing in something greater that we've already always had. And when we believe in stuff, that we don't see yet, this comes back to surviving the story within, because we're also believing in stuff that's not so good for us, and that's not seen. Or we're predicting a false future. Dr. Joe talks about this also, the conditioned past, right? The familiar past will predict the condition or the familiar future, right? Because we're believing in the same cycles. Oh, well, this happened to me, or he was this way, so all of a sudden this person is going to be exactly like that person because they just did that same exact behavior trait, and so on and so forth. I just did XYZ, and so therefore, because of this, I know that this is going to be the outcome. And I reprogram myself with the same conditioned belief, and I never change. And if I just stop and I remember, but that person is not that other person. I am not the person I was yesterday. I evolve. I learned something and I changed the behavior. And that's kind of how we progress and we evolve. Yeah, I want to ask you, and also just before I ask you this question, but, the technology example was just like our phones, right? We have a new update. Just like we're debugging, we're reprogramming, just like technology, just like your phone. You said this yourself. You said, just like your phone and your computer needs to update, so you do as well. So you can take on the new information. Otherwise, the old information won't get downloaded into the old process. The new information will get downloaded into the old processing system. But the new information from the updates will. So how are we updating ourselves? How are we reprogramming ourselves? I want to ask, what has been your biggest transformation since coming to terms with these new insights?
It's a good question.
Girl, I'm getting you from all sides today.
I'll tell you, this morning I was meditating and I was like, I'm such a coyote. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I mean that, like, a coyote, they're a trickster, right? And they trick themselves. They're like, have you seen the coyote in the Roadrunner, right? The Looney Tunes. He just is always running into something or an anvil, and it's like, wait, is that wrong? Let me just go make sure that it's wrong.
Right? And the Roadrunner is just so carefree, right? Almost just kind of almost teasing in a way. And the coyote is trying to get that Roadrunner. It's so symbolic. Right?
And we're both.
It's a really great illustration.
We're both. It's like we're both, but I guess I want to go back to the changing of the programming. That's not to shame anybody at all. It's so not to shame anybody because
it's not easy.
People told me that, and I was just like, if I knew what I had to do right now, and if I felt like it was if my will and my mind and my spirit were all together, don't you think that I would be doing that? Don't you think that I'd be doing the thing? And people would ask me you must not want to get better. You want to stay there. You are lazy. You are arrogant. You whatever, all of this stuff. And I just, and I got it all. And I was like, okay. And the thing that I learned, I was like, I am still a child of God. I'm still valuable. I'm still worthy of love. Mm-hmm. And what is all this pointing to? It's pointing to the fact that I don't believe that. I might say it, but I didn't feel and believe it at the point. And I was like, where does that come from? That's fascinating, and I had to like grieve we grieve our younger selves, because we're like, oh, if only I would have known that, my sexuality was like powerful and sacred. And if only I would have known that my attention was like gold. And I say this for everybody, we don't value ourselves. We don't necessarily know how to value ourselves, because maybe we haven't even had the experience of what it's like to be truly valued for who you are. Right. And that's like and that's generational. Also, we could take racism, sexism, like all these things. Right. And then to say, I wonder how far that goes back. And then I'm curious if that's where like the mental, emotional, physical issue started, because we split from there's something wrong with me, or I'm not enough, or I'm too this. And those are really not trite, but they're surface level things to say. But when we really think about it, like, we used to hang witches and burn them, and we called them witches. And really they were just like people who were connected to spirit, people who were connected to nature, and I'm not saying that there weren't bad witches. I think that there are people who were practicing, they knew how certain things worked, and they were probably practicing, this is men and women, dark arts. We call them the dark arts, right? But that's just to say that like a connection to other world is like, it's when we make that wrong, we create more mental health problems, and then, yes, we can observe that there's a chemical imbalance. Yes, that is a product of the original split, or the original, I don't know Ayurvedic terms, maybe I will one day, but, or Ayurvedic, sorry. But you explain it like scientifically, and I'm like, here's the exponential. But I will say that what I learned is that I have to be my own best friend, and I have to trust myself. And when I feel like I don't trust myself, I have to investigate why. And, and that like, I only have maybe, I don't know how many more years of being Maria Colleen in this world. So why not the hell just be you? Just be it. Just stop with all the like,
How bad does it have to get, right? How bad does it have to get?
You killing yourself, because that's not worth it. It's not, and it's sad. And I wish that I could say to someone, just, like sort of just pluck that thought and that program right out, and be like, no, that was a lie that somebody told you at one point that manifested into a really disease, misprogramming virus in your mind. And, so we're all kind of venturing back to that, right? Like collectively. So yeah,
suicide is it's really hard topic, because everyone is in a different space right now with that. And we have not yet entered into the aftermath of this pandemic. So it's projected that the mental health crisis is going to skyrocket after we are now coming to terms with living through and with what we have currently entered into, what we're working with, what we're doing. And people are still in the uncertainty phase right now, along with a lot of loss, a lot of financial loss, a lot of substantial loss, a lot of sustainable loss, a lot of uncertainty is going on. And with that, it comes back to also the isolation. It also comes back isolation within the self. So everything that we're talking about is wonderful, but someone that is in the depths of this darkness, that is really hard for them to see the light, and they are really alone, and they are suffering in silence, because they may say something and it may not even be taken seriously. I know in the Latino community, we'll be having this conversation with NAMI in the coming, I'm sorry about that, it's someone in the background, but I know that with the National Association of Mental Illness, we'll be having this conversation in the Latino community. Because in Latino communities and minority communities, BIPOC communities, it is kind of shunned. We have not yet entered into the aftermath of this pandemic. So it's projected that the mental health crisis is going to skyrocket after we are now coming to terms with living through and with what we have currently entered into, you know, what we're working with, what we're doing. And people are still in the uncertainty phase right now, along with a lot of loss, a lot of financial loss, a lot of substantial loss, a lot of sustainable loss, a lot of uncertainty is going on. And with that, it comes back to also the isolation. It also comes back isolation within the self. So everything that we're talking about is wonderful, but someone that is in the depths of this darkness, that is really hard for them to see the light, and they are really alone, and they are suffering in silence because they may say something and it may not even be taken seriously. I know in the Latino community, we'll be having this conversation with NAMI in the coming, I'm sorry about that, it's someone in the background, but I know that with the National Association of Mental Illness, we'll be having this conversation in the Latino community. Because in Latino communities and minority communities, BIPOC communities, it is kind of shunned to talk about those experiences, because a lot of it does stem and root from the family unit. And so that is a conversation for next month, but in November, where we jump in with NAMI. But you lead into it quite eloquently, because suicide and suicide prevention and suicide awareness are three different things. And, you know, prevention is preventing somebody, so they're in a space where we can actually reach out to them and be with them and talk to them and give them the resources and tools. When we're in suicide awareness, similar, but we're aware that someone is about to or is heavily considering taking this exit. And of course, suicide is the ultimate end all. And it's not the only way out. And it's actually, you know, we will inevitably be all there, but we don't want to make it quicker than it needs to be. You know, that super dark area of your space right now is there for this reason, because you were chosen, as much as it might suck, but you were chosen because you have more strength than you realize. I say this to every single one of my students. You are stronger than you realize and more powerful than you think. And when you are coming face to face in the darkest of times, recognize that circle is only going to make you stronger. That little hole of not goodness is going to make you stronger. You know, we've all had our fair share of traumas. We've had our fair share. We're all in a collective trauma right now as a collective going through a pandemic that has shifted lives considerably around the world, not just in a home or not just in a country, one country or one state, in the world. And it's a global trauma. And we all share it. And it's so important to find community, because even on social media, we get lost. As well as social media contributes to egging on children and youths to go ahead and kill themselves, because there's some really not nice people out there, you know, and you can't listen to those naysayers. You can't listen to those limiting beliefs that are being put on you, because everything we might be saying is one thing, but to actually receive it and live it, you need to understand, for those of you that are sitting in that space, because I've sat in that space too, you know, and I too have found myself in those areas. You will get through it. And as Winston Churchill says, when you're going through hell, keep going, because the only way out is up. And when you come out of that, you are going to be the teacher to take someone's hand, and you are going to be the one to help someone overcome the very same thing you just went through. You are. Yes, you are. Don't tell me no. Yes, you are. You might be shaking now. That's like someone coming to my teacher training and telling me, I don't want to be a teacher. That's the student that becomes the best teacher. That's the student. Every single time without fail, they enter my teacher training, they straight up tell me, I'm only doing this to deepen my practice and to take on all the medical information. And then they end up becoming an amazing teacher. So know that you are going through your own teacher training, because you are your greatest teacher and you are your best student. And with that, I know that we are coming up on the end of our time, But I just wanted to point out a couple things before I ask Maria Colleen her last question. And I also want to let you know that we'll touch back on African shamanism in our next conversation when we also enter into paradigm shifts, because this will lend itself really well into paradigms with African shamanism and also shamanism in general when it comes to energetic healing and energetic work, emotional work. But Maria Colleen mentions that even if it's, and she even says it here in her quote, even if it's the grossest, darkest, most disgusting and shameful places we find inside and out, that love and God can still exist there. That is that light. That is that little crack that she spoke of, that God shines through. And our choice, big word, and she bolded it also, big word, choice, all right? Our choice is how much are we going to let love in? How much will we allow ourselves to accept and integrate the farthest reaches of ourselves, both personally and collectively? This is both a painful reconciliation and a liberating one, where we're at right now in the world. And the truth is, we are all one organism. We are one. The eternal, the external world is a reflection of our internal world. Literally galaxies on the inside. And that is so true. I know this might sound a little abstract and woo-woo, but from Hindu philosophy, Parvati is the mother of Krishna, and she tells Krishna to stop eating the dirt, and he keeps eating the dirt, and she goes over to him and she says, open your mouth. And when he opens his mouth, she sees the cosmos. And when we see the cosmos inside Krishna's mouth, Krishna is associated to God consciousness, part of the trinity of Brahma and Vishnu and Shiva. And he's one of the manifestations of them. And Krishna represents the cosmos. Krishna is one of the main characters in the Bhagavad Gita with Arjuna. And, we find such great strength through recognizing our cosmic makeup. So Maria Colleen, will you please explain to us any of the challenges that you're still facing humanly? This is life. This is where we are.
That's a good question. So my biggest challenge right now, I think, is birthing the artist and the teacher that has always been within me, and knowing how to support that, just in the physical world, because I realized that for many generations I had probably that's been taken from me, or I wasn't doing it, or we ignore the God that wants to be born through us, right? We ignore the light that wants to be born through us. So it's a big transition of balancing my imagination with healing my body, because I'm probably in pain 24/7. There's something that's, just from the rebirthing, growing pains, and then also holding on to what has to be done in my physical world. And then, being really curious about how I spend my energy and value my time and my energy, and noticing the triggers that happen, when that's crossed, and how I'm going to approach that differently. So, and I've noticed I've changed, and it's pretty cool. I'm like, oh, that's, I can notice a change now. So, relearning, regrowing, and continuing to believe in bringing the spirit manifest in the world. I will say that those are my challenges, and also the work that I have to do, like we all do. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sister. I am so grateful for you joining us this morning and taking your time out of your day to do this and to share your story. And I'm looking forward to you coming back for our next couple weeks that we have together. For y'all that want to follow Maria Colleen, she is going to also share this on her Instagram page, that you will see it there too. And you can follow her at Studio MG. You want to tell us exactly how to spell your Instagram so we can follow you?
Yeah, it's studio.mc.magda, Dalena. It's Magdalena. Magdalena, like Mary Magdalena, Maria Magdalena, I guess the Latin iteration of that name. And I will be building my website. That is like my goals for the end of the year, is to have my store and my website running. So thank you so much for having me here. It's really a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Instagrammers, you can also find her over on Facebook as well. And if you join the mailing list, you'll have her information. I'll be sending that out today, a recap of our lovely conversation. It will be on the Bhakti blog over on Tumblr, and as well as on our website, JBYF NOLA, NOLA.org. Thank you so much, Maria, and I will see you next week.
Besitos.
Besitos. And besitos to our community. Much love, everyone. Thank you for joining us as always. Namaste, namaste, namaste.